Hay Festival.
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 Bienvenidos al podcast Hay Festival 2025, un espacio para imaginar otro mundo.
Bienvenidos al podcast 2025, la edición especial del podcast del Hay Festival en español, en la que celebramos el 20º aniversario de nuestro festival en Cartagena de Indias. Yo soy Iñaki Lasetura.
Y yo, Gaby García. Para celebrar este momento único para nosotros, les pedimos a nuestros seguidores que nos enviaran las preguntas que consideraban eran claves para entender el mundo que vivimos. Después de un largo ejercicio, nuestro equipo ha seleccionado las 20 preguntas más significativas y para responderlas reunimos algunas de las mentes más brillantes y más expertas en cada tema, que participaron en la más reciente edición del Festival de Cartagena en enero de 2025. Empecemos.
Chancellor es historiador financiero, periodista y estratega de inversiones. En 2008 recibió el Premio George Polk de informes financieros por su artículo Ponzi Nation en la revista Institutional Investor. Su último libro, El precio del tiempo, ha sido nominado para el libro de negocios del año Financial Times 2022 y fue galardonado con el Premio Hayek 2023.
Chancellor, welcome to our podcast. How can the economy, the growth model become an attractive alternative?
I think it depends. Well, it depends on what you mean by economic growth. If you meant by economic growth using more and more material resources, then you would have, you can imagine a world in which you have higher living standards without using more resources. For instance, we have a washing machine. Washing machines now use less water than they used to, and they perhaps clean better than they used to. So you get a higher living standard, but you're using less resource. Now I, for instance, I read books on a Kindle. I read my newspaper news on an iPad. What that means, and I read, when I'm reading papers, academic papers, I read them on my iPad. What that means is that I don't buy so many books, so less resources. I don't buy newspapers, and I don't have to print off. I probably don't. I probably save, 2,000 pages of printing a year. Okay. But on the other hand, I still have the utility or use of the news and reading books and so forth. Now, if demand for degrowth is actually to destroy or to reduce the quality of people's lives, well, I think that's a big issue. The people who talk about degrowth, I'm not sure if they're prepared to, do they want the lights not to be working? Do they want there to be no running water? Do they not want to be able to get to work or take their children to school? So I think the idea of degrowth per se, it's a sort of dangerous illusion, and very very unsympathetic, because you take a country like Colombia, you're not. There's still you're obviously a big middle class, and a lot of people here enjoy a good standard of living, but there are a lot of people who don't enjoy it. You can see it, yeah. And if one's talking about degrowth, you were saying that people have to live in shacks without water and electricity. I just think people, I don't know, but I think people who talk about degrowth haven't really thought it through.
One of the other aspects that we had many discussions about in these past years, it has been about legalization or not legalization of drugs. So if we think in a global economy way of thinking, how would this legalization of drugs affect this global economy?
It's like, so the problem with legalization of drugs, on paper, it sounds straightforward. I'm personally, Colombians very aware of probably no. I mean, I don't know the history, but probably no country has suffered as much from the illegal drugs as Colombia, because you have, first thing you do if you make drugs illegal is push up the price of the drugs, and then you create a mafia, that runs the drug business, and then the mafia then corrupts the state, and so on, and then and I think in Colombia, 30 years ago, the drugs sort of were distorting, fair to say, the entire society and the governments. So in principle, it would be a nice idea to get rid of it. And that's been my first thought. But then, it's not as if it's not as if cocaine, all these old-fashioned drugs like cocaine and heroin and marijuana, whatever, which are grown from plants, not as if they didn't have a huge competition nowadays from synthetic drugs. But in America, you had all these, tens of thousands of people dying every year from synthetic opioids. So I just, I spent quite a lot of time in Massachusetts where they've legalized marijuana. I think it's fair enough. I think drugs like cocaine, it's an impossibly difficult problem. That's what I see it, which is unfortunate. But you legalize it, and then a whole load of kids are going to be taking crack cocaine as teenagers. Yeah. And you illegalize it, and you've got your Pablo Escobars and everything else. So you're as they say, you're caught between a rock and a hard place with this. And I wish I had a solution, but I don't really.
Okay, very interesting about different problems that the government have to thinking about it. And about this, and the next question is, are there any viable alternative models to democracy?
Well, it depends what you mean by viable. Might also depend what you mean by democracy. I think it's Winston Churchill, one of his sort of jokes was that democracy is the least bad form of government. And the way I see it is that the main advantage of a democracy, as we like to say, is that you can kick the bastards out. And so when they fail you, you can change. And that I think is the most important function of a democracy. But then, then democracies themselves get corrupted, and they get corrupted, in particular, they have a tendency to form into two political parties. Political parties become sort of professionalized. They have their own interests. People who are drawn into those worlds are not really normal people. And then the democracy itself ceases to reflect the needs and desires of the populace. Democracy, people often complain, also is very short term, so it doesn't. The politicians, who constantly looking to their short term advantage, incapable really of taking long term views. So that's problematic. That you can have dictatorships as an alternative. China is the leading alternative to democracy today. It's a country under the rule of the what it calls itself the Chinese Communist Party, but it's actually just a if you will, it's not communist, it's just a clique, and it offers what we call a sort of technocratic rule. And the idea is that these people, can deliver policies, can pursue a long-term agenda free from the vagaries of democratic capitalism. And lots of people today are attracted to the Chinese model, particularly with these long-term threats of, climate change or pandemics or this and that. And my view is that the Chinese system has always been that way. China's always is what they call a bureaucratic state, and it's always had a policy-making elite, what we call them the mandarins, the mandarinate, under an emperor, or now the Communist Party General Secretary, that seeks to command everything. And the trouble is that with that system is it can look quite efficient in the near term, because it gets things done. You can build roads or you can build bridges and so on. But in the long term, it's a system prone to corruption, and it's a system prone to inefficiency, because you build bridges where bridges are not needed. You take resources from the poor and give them and use them to spend on government projects that don't meet the needs of the poor. So I think in the long term, that system fails. It doesn't necessarily fail by collapsing. It fails by improving the living standards of the people, and it entrenches a small elite that live well off the benefits of the rest of the population. So it's a viable alternative, but I don't think it's an attractive one.
I was going to say that unfortunately we're running out of time, so I'm going to merge two of the main concerns that our readers had when they made the questions about inequality and artificial intelligence. So how can we make sure, how can we ensure that artificial intelligence does not exacerbate these existing inequalities?
Yes, good question. The truth is, people talk a lot about artificial intelligence. They don't really know yet what it means. There's more talk than understanding, and I don't pretend to understand it myself. What we know, I think what we do know, is that you've had the first phase of technology, from the internet bubble, led to the creation of these very big companies, Google and Facebook, and then you've got and it entrenched the Microsoft's monopoly, and so we tend to think of technology leading to inequality, and I think that's that has been true of the first round of technology, of the first age of the internet. It's not clear to me that the era of AI, whatever that means, will be the same as the era of the sort of Internet 1.0, or Internet.com 1.0, as they sometimes call it, because you saw last week, Chinese company, I can't quite remember what it's called, came out with a new AI product that apparently cost $9 million to develop, train, as they call it. And that compares to these American companies that have been spending $100 billion training. So And apparently, the new Chinese product, AI product, is sort of pretty much as good as this product developed by OpenAI. So if this is a model for the future, what that means is that the next wave of AI investment may not be one of technological monopolies, which is why Jeff Bezos is occasionally the richest man in the world or whatever. So it may be that the next age will be one of fragmenting technology, and when you talk about inequality, what it strikes me that the AI will probably do, a bit like the internet, it'll take a lot of some like middle tier jobs, if you want to call them that, middle class jobs, and get rid of them. So it makes life probably a bit more difficult for the middle classes. I'm not sure if you're poor, it's going to make life. What I really don't buy is the idea that the AI will get rid of all these jobs. I think that is complete nonsense.
Yes, it's very interesting, very complicated, different things, different topics. So yes, we need time. So thank you for your time. Thank you so much for being part of our special edition of the podcast Imaginemos otro mundo. Gracias, Edward Chancellor, por esta edición especial del podcast Hay Festival en español Imaginemos otro mundo.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Gracias por acompañarnos. Una producción de Ojo por Ojo Multimedia. Hay Festival 2025. Un espacio para que imaginemos otro mundo.